What could have driven thousands of medieval warriors to embark on a long journey from Europe to the Middle East, enduring scorching heat and countless dangers? The promise of absolution from all sins and a guaranteed place in paradise. And of course, the hope of gaining war trophies. Today, we will talk about the Crusades and share 10 interesting facts about this historical phenomenon. Let's start with the background. In the 10th century, Europe looked very different from today. Unified states, as we know them now, did not exist. Feudalism was the dominant political system. Kings nominally owned lands, but they granted them to feudal lords, who in turn distributed them among their vassals and knights. However, younger sons of feudal lords often ended up landless and without means of support. Their only options were to become mercenaries or turn to banditry. At the same time, Europe's population was growing, and the Catholic Church wielded immense power. The Pope could excommunicate any ruler, which effectively meant the loss of their authority. Christians lived not only in Europe but also in the East, in Byzantium. However, they followed the Orthodox faith, and relations between Catholics and Orthodox Christians were tense. The Great Schism of 1054 permanently divided the Church. The Eastern Empire suffered from constant raids by nomads, especially the Seljuk Turks. Byzantine Emperor Alexios the Komnenos appealed to the Pope for military assistance. Pope Urban II saw this as an opportunity not only to help Byzantium, but also to strengthen his own authority and attempt to reunite the Christian world. Thus, the idea of the Crusades was born. In 1095, at the Council of Clermont, Urban II delivered a fiery speech, calling on Christians to march eastward. He promised all participants the forgiveness of sins, as well as wealth and land. People began sewing red crosses onto their clothes, hence the term Crusaders. News of the campaign spread quickly across Europe, and thousands set off on the journey. However, the first to march were not seasoned warriors, but a massive crowd of peasants and beggars led by a monk named Peter the Hermit. More than 60,000 people, armed only with sticks and pitchforks, set off for the east. Poorly prepared and expecting to be fed by the locals, they soon resorted to looting and killing. Jewish communities suffered particularly brutal pogroms along their route. However, upon reaching Byzantium, this army of peasants encountered organized resistance. Hungarians and Bulgarians wiped out a significant portion of them. When the Crusaders finally arrived in Constantinople, Emperor Alexios quickly arranged for their transportation across the Bosphorus to rid himself of these unwanted guests. Once on the other side, the peasant Crusaders were almost entirely slaughtered by the Seljuk Turks. The true crusade began later when experienced knights, counts, and barons set out for the east. Their army numbered between 45,000 and 60,000 warriors. The journey was long and arduous. Hunger, disease, and unbearable heat claimed many lives. Upon reaching Constantinople, the Crusaders met Emperor Alexios, who had expected a small group of mercenaries, not a full-scale army. He offered them support on the condition that all reconquered lands would be returned to Byzantium. Many knights agreed, but some refused. Nevertheless, the crusade continued. The Crusaders captured major cities such as Nicaea and Antioch. The siege of Antioch was particularly challenging, and only the betrayal of one of the city's guards allowed them to break in. However, immediately after that, a Muslim army besieged the city, trapping the Crusaders inside. Despite this, they managed to endure and continue their journey. In 1099, they reached Jerusalem. The city was heavily fortified, but the Crusaders used siege towers and trebuchets to breach the defenses. On July 15, 1099, they stormed the city, engaging in brutal street battles. The capture of Jerusalem was accompanied by a massacre. Chroniclers describe how blood flowed through the streets as homes and temples were looted. The Crusaders slaughtered men, women, and children indiscriminately. After taking the city, they established the Kingdom of Jerusalem, with Knight Godfrey of Bouillon becoming its first ruler, preferring the title Defender of the Holy Sepulchre. There were multiple crusades. Some historians count 4, while others claim there were 8 or more. The Second Crusade aimed to recapture the city of Edessa, not to be confused with Odessa, but it failed. The Third Crusade was launched to retake Jerusalem, but instead a truce was made allowing Christian pilgrims to visit the holy sites. The Fourth Crusade never reached the Holy Land. Instead, the Crusaders attacked their fellow Christians in Constantinople, looting the Orthodox capital. In addition to the Middle East, crusades were also conducted in the Baltic region, targeting pagan tribes. One of the most unusual events was the so-called Children's Crusade in 1212. According to legends, thousands of children from France and Germany set off to reclaim Jerusalem, believing that the sea would part before them and that Muslims would surrender the city without resistance. However, the German group never made it to the Holy Land, and the French children were tragically tricked by merchants who sold them into slavery. After the First Crusade, the famous Knights Templar order was founded. Initially, their mission was to protect pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem, but over time, they became a powerful military and financial organization. The Templars effectively created the first banking system, allowing travelers to transfer money between cities. However, their growing influence angered European monarchs. In the early 14th century, French King Philip IV, who owed the order a massive debt, orchestrated their downfall. The Templars were accused of heresy and sorcery, tortured and executed while their wealth was seized. Although the Crusades were largely tragic, they brought significant changes to Europe. Contact with the East introduced Europeans to advanced knowledge in science, medicine, architecture, and philosophy, which helped spark the Renaissance. The Crusaders also brought back new crops, such as apricots. However, the conflicts left lasting scars, and even today, the term crusader is used in the rhetoric of some radical groups. Thus ended the era of the Crusades, leaving a deep mark on world history. If you are interested in other historical topics, leave a comment on what you would like to learn more about.